Hello, my name is Parker Roloff.
And I'm Patrick Clark.
And our videographer is Ian Gill. Today is May 12th, 2019, and we are joined by Mr. Joseph Campbell, a Vietnam War veteran, at his house in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Good evening, Mr. Campbell. Can you start off by saying your full name for us, please?
Yeah, my name is Joseph Francis Campbell.
And is there a reason that your parents picked this name, or like, is there any significance?
I think it was St. Joseph and St. Francis. Quite frankly, they're very devout Catholics.
And do you have a nickname?
Joe. Yeah, most people call me Joe.
Okay. Can you tell us where you and when you were born?
I was born June 5th, 1947. The family lived in Lombard, Illinois, but there was no hospital there, so I was born in Elmhurst, Illinois on June 5th, as I said. Yep.
How did your family come to live in this location? Was it just where they grew up, or?
I think my dad actually came from Canada, and he migrated, if you will, to the United States in New York, and then he wound up in Lombard, Illinois, and married my mother, and they had 9 children. I was 8th out of 9.
Can you tell us a little bit about the area that you grew up in, maybe your house, what the neighborhood was like?
Well, the first house that we lived in Illinois, or Lombard, that I recall, my dad actually had built for a lot of 4 or 5 bedrooms and what have you. And as the 3 older ones got married and one went to the priesthood, he had a heart problem, and so in 1954, unfortunately, he passed away. And my mother happened to be a registered nurse prior to their marriage, so she renewed her license, registered nurse license, and she had a job in Geneva, Illinois at the hospital. So we moved to St. Charles, Illinois, the next city over, and that's where we kind of grew up, really. St. Patrick's Grade School, etc. Yep.
Very good. Can you tell us you mentioned your father and your mother. Can you tell us a little bit more about your family, any siblings or?
Sure. Be more than happy to. My father's first wife actually died from rheumatic fever. And so the 3 oldest, my oldest sister Joan, Mary Ellen, and Peter, were from, if you will, my half sisters and brother, which never knew really. And then when my dad married my mother, she had 6. And, you know, I would say I really didn't know the older ones all that well, although we did live with them periodically during the summer and what have you, and family-wise. But, yeah, my other brothers, I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and that we grew up in St. Charles, Illinois. And then as time went on in high school, I actually went to the seminary for 2 years of high school, and then wound up leaving there and going to Marmion Military Academy for my last 2 years of high school.
So what was it like growing up in this area? Like, what did you like to do for fun? What, you know, what activities did you participate in?
Well, I tell you, back then, a lot of it was just sandlot baseball, you know, stuff like that. We didn't have TV, and obviously some of the modern technology things, but we were very much neighbor kids, and there were a lot of us. And so we'd play a lot of pickup baseball. We'd play hide and seek. We'd play cowboys and Indians, and this type of thing, you know, really having a good childhood. And then being the fact that with the father dying, we had a lot of home responsibilities as far as making sure the snow and the mowing and stuff like that, and help take care of my mother and looking after each other, trying not to get into too much trouble, which I know we did. And yeah.
You mentioned that you had a lot of home responsibilities. Can you maybe go into a little bit more depth with that? Like what kind of things did you have to do? Did you have a job?
I had a job. Matter of fact, very early on, between lawn mowing, other neighbors, of some of the elderly neighbors, snow shoveling, and then caddying. I did a lot of caddying at the country club, and you had to be 14 years old to do that. But by God, it was a great job. It paid about $4 for 18 holes, and it was probably about 7 miles from where I lived, and I usually rode the bike, or we would hitchhike back in that era. And so between that and then working on a construction job, which I wound up helping shoveling, making cement on a sewer project till after high school, then I wound up going to technology school in Chicago.
You said you caddied. You must have met some pretty interesting people caddying.
Oh, I did. And they had a lot of fun caddying. The worst time was actually ladies' day at the country club. And we had to wind up caddying for these ladies. And at that time, we carried like 2 bags. And we didn't have golf carts that motorized. And my word, we'd wind up going over 3 times the course with the ladies. I hope people that see this, and if you told them what club should I use, and if there was a good shot, then you might have got an extra 50-cent tip or something like that. So yeah, we had a lot of fun there, and plus I was able to also work in the kitchen after I caddied, and I would wash dishes and stuff like that. And the nice thing there was I got to eat. Not that I didn't eat at home, but it wasn't peanut butter and jelly and grilled cheese. This was some really good steaks and lobster and anything that I could, muster up. So it was a lot of fun and good hard work. Yep. So after caddying, it was really a case now. I worked at a gas station, and you had to be 16 there, and that's before they had hydraulic lifts and stuff like that on cars. And they had tires that had tubes in them, so that if they got a flat tire, you had to pull the whole thing off, replace the tube, fix it. And oil changes were done in a pit. And you go down there at 8 o'clock in the morning and get out at noon, and you smell like an oil pot. And, but these are all things that we did to earn our keep and to help our mother out, because things were financially quite tough. And so that's basically, I wound up, if you will, with the going to Marmion Military Academy only because it was a Catholic school. And even though I lived in St. Charles, the great high school there, but my mother did not want me to go there. She felt I needed a little more discipline, and it was run by the Benedictines, in addition to having the military structure, because we wore uniforms. And so anyway, to make a long story short, she even gave me the opportunity not only to go there, but to pay for it. And so therefore I needed those jobs to pay my tuition and take care of some of my free time money to have a little food and a date or something. Yeah.
You mentioned your mom was a nurse and your father had passed away. So, home life, who was there to care for you? Was your mom always quite busy with being a nurse, or? Boy,
I tell you, she was busy, and nurses, I don't know how so much they are now, but back then she had a very weird schedule. She'd work 3 days on, 2 off, and then work from 8 to 4, then from 4 to midnight or something. So in a way, we were the 6 of us at home were kind of on each other's discipline, trying to figure out who's in charge, and hopefully not get in trouble so that mom would wind up worrying. But yeah, we had our pecking order, but a lot of it, the boys was strength. The stronger ones were the ones that led. But no, it was quite a challenge. But I think the biggest thing was we had a deep respect for our mother, even though we weren't the best of kids. But we had a deep respect and didn't want to get our mother involved in some of the problems that we were growing up with.
I know you said that you like to play, pick up sports with your friends and stuff. That's what you did in your free time. Do you remember, and are you still close with any of your friends now? Are there any stories that you?
I tell you, I wish so. I got growing up in St. Charles, Illinois, and then going into the service, and which we'll get into a little later. But the kids that I grew up with, basically, once I went into the service, and then I got transferred from Illinois up to Wisconsin, that kind of, I would say that most of the kids, unfortunately, which I'll get in later, a couple of them were killed in Vietnam that we grew up with. And that was very, very stressful and troubling. But nonetheless, I would say that I really have not been close with the kids that we grew up with, plus a couple of my brothers, 3 of my brothers have already passed. The most recent one was a couple of years ago.
Would you say you did a lot of things with your brothers and your siblings? Like, you know, you mentioned playing sports with your friends, obviously, but like, was there a lot of time with your siblings, or would you mostly be working and going on with friends?
I would say after middle of high school, I would say we did very little as far as the brothers. They worked also. One of them worked at a Tasty Freeze, which is like a Dairy Queen, which we all love because we go down there and sneak us an ice cream cone or something like that. And you know, the other worked at the sewage treatment plant, quite the opposite of places. And so I would say that we became more helping each other out, but we didn't see each other a lot, and because of their schedules or my schedule. And then, of course, I started dating and what have you in my junior year of high school, and that pretty much took me away from the routine family.
Okay, so now moving a little bit into your later childhood, when you're starting to get into school, can you tell us a little bit about your grade school, middle school? I
did very well when we lived in Lombard. My first 4 grades were at Sacred Heart Grade School in Lombard, Illinois, and when my dad died, that was it. That's when my mom had to move us to St. Charles, so she'd be closer for her nursing job. And unfortunately, as I recall, I was a pretty doggone good student in my first 4 years. Never a problem. But when I got to St. Patrick's and St. Charles, and of course with the dad being gone and this disruption of the family big time, I actually went to 6th grade on probation, meaning they weren't sure whether they were going to send me back to do 5th grade again. And obviously I had some severe problems which nobody really knew how to deal with, and I was getting in fights and stuff like that. And you know, I'd say that was quite a challenging time. And but we finally grew out of that, but that was pretty much it.
These schools that you talk about, St. Patrick's and Sacred Heart, they sound like Catholic schools.
You're right,
correct?
yeah.
How big of a role did faith play in your life during this time?
I think it was very disciplined. I know when my dad was alive, even though I don't recall, you know, with all the kids in the family, but we'd have the rosary every night, and we'd be on our knees in the living room, and you know, we'd be saying the rosary, and we'd go to church, and they would, "Don't you dare put your butt on the pew," or he'd find a way to get to you and smack you. Those are a few things that I do remember. But my oldest brother was studying for the priesthood. So I would say that the religion outside of we had a thing called the Baltimore Catechism, and someday maybe you guys will find out that's what we were all raised with in the Catholic schools. We call it now the Jesus of Baltimore, because they had a lot of just rigid, and we had nuns that wore nunnery outfit, and they were like Zorro, for crying out loud. They always had a ruler somewhere hidden in there. But in any event, I would say the role of religion was very strong, challenging to some extent, disciplined in another, but it did provide a base of you know, where I would say that my prayers were always for asking, and you know, that type of thing. So anyway.
So you mentioned that you had a very strict faith life. Would you say that has helped you today? Like, would you say that faith still plays a large role in your life?
I would say this. When I got out of grade school, I know that I jumped a little bit earlier where I said went to the military academy, but I actually went to the seminary for my freshman and sophomore year of high school. Why? Well, my oldest brother was a priest. My other brother he was there studying, and it's like, well, this is what I would do. So I went into the seminary for my freshman year and sophomore year of high school. And there we actually lived there in Geneva, Illinois at the seminary. for 9 months out of the year. And then we go home for summer to earn money so that we could pay our tuition there. And there I would say that, and really I could sum it up in this way why I didn't stay. We had a retreat on my second year, a 3-day silent retreat. And the retreat master had us really dig into ourselves, and he had us ask if these were the duties and responsibilities of the priesthood, would you do those because you love of God, or you would do them because you had to do them? If you're doing them because you had to do them, get out, leave now. Well, I didn't leave. That was a 3-day silent retreat, but one guy did. And boy, I thought that kid, all due respect, he had balls. And he left. Well, when it got through at the end of the year, and my older brother, the priest, came home for vacation, in the end of my sophomore year, I told him, Pete, I can't go back to the seminary. This is not for me. And so that's what happened. So after discussing this with my older brother, the priest, he tried to encourage me to go one more year. I said, Peter, I can't do that. I feel it's just not there. And that's when my mother insisted that I go to this military academy with the Benedictines running it. But my faith at that point, I think really, quite frankly, was very strong. As I look back, I did not like the idea that I could not stay in for the priesthood, because I felt in one breath it'd be like a failure. On the other hand, as I look back, boy, did God help me through that, because I don't think I would have been a very good priest, but I learned a lot of the foundation and the spirituality, if you will, not just the dictates of the 10 Commandments, if you will.
So now moving into your next school, obviously the military academy. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what were your favorite subjects? Did you participate in any sports or anything like that?
Well, I'll tell you, I can move off that one real quick. I wanted to go out for football. And a lot of the guys that I'd grown to know, they encouraged me, and I went out for the team. And I pretty well made it, but then I started realizing I don't have any money to pay my tuition. I wasn't thinking that far down the road. And I had that gas station job, that I basically told the owner that, thank you, I'm leaving. And then it wasn't a week later, I'm back there, I need this job. And because I had to have a car also, because where I went to school was about 15 miles from St. Charles. It was in Aurora, Illinois. So, outside of hitchhiking, which was the way we got around back then, we drove. But as it basically turned out, I would say that that's where I learned a lot as far as having to make decisions. And that's where, when I finally graduated from high school, I wasn't sure what I was going to do other than I wanted to go to technology school. I really liked the automotive side, and I helped with tune-ups and all that. And so I went to Allied Institute of Technology in Chicago, and things were going relatively well. But again, I had to pay for it, and I had to live down in Chicago. So I went to school from like 3 in the afternoon till 10 at night, and I worked at United Parcel Service in Chicago from like 7 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, loading and unloading trucks. So I had enough income to take care of the responsibilities. And then basically it turned out, that's when the Vietnam War, this would be 1965, when I graduated from high school. And so probably around November of 65, I'm really getting worn out here in Chicago between going to school and working. Yeah, I'm paying for it, but boy, I'm just running ragged. And it's like, well, I could have probably get drafted when I graduate from this thing, which would be another year down the road. And then I heard, well, go to the Army and they'll give you all this training and blah, 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 if you enlist, as opposed to being drafted back then. I decided to enlist. And they said, oh, we'll give you that automotive training and in the Army. So in any event, I did enlist in December of 65 and went in on the beginning of January of 66 for basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Basic training was about 3.5, 4 months. And from there, learning the basic training with all the basic things that we were taught and physically got in shape for. Then they sent me to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Maryland for automotive and artillery repair and service. And that was, quite frankly, it was a very good school. And that was about 26 weeks. And I got orders in, I think it was August of 66 to go to Germany. I thought I was going to Vietnam. I was ready to go to Vietnam. And 2 other guys that I had grown to know from the area that I grew up in, one of them was wife just got married, the wife was pregnant. And as it turns out, I went up to the first sergeant because he's going to Vietnam, I'm going to Germany, and we got the same skill set, if you will, MOS they called it. And the sergeant there just said, get back in line, and you can request that when you get to your assignment. So anyways, it turns out I wind up going to Germany, get to the 8th Infantry Division, sign in, and I asked them for a request for transfer, which you could do. And so as it turns out, I filled out the request for transfer. They thought I was crazy, but whatever, you can request it, doesn't mean you're gonna get it. So that was in August of 66. I wanna back up a little bit though. The other thing was really kind of neat as I look back. They sent me over on a troop carrier from New York to Bremerhaven, Germany. So I got a cruise with about 2,200 other vets. It was terrible, but we got to go over the Atlantic Ocean and through the English Channel, and it was quite an experience. So anyway, after I got to Germany, things were going, quite frankly, very well. I was in a good company. I had a good company commander. Things were going relatively well. They put me up for some things to run, like for Soldier of the Month, and things were very good. The advantage for doing these, getting for these Soldier of the Month awards was that not only did you get a room of your own for 30 days, not the barracks, and you get a 3-day pass, which was great, and you had no reveille or no PT, and that, for 30 days, that was quite an incentive. So I went up for that, and things went well, and advanced up to the division level, and all of a sudden in December of 66, my company commander, it was I think the 22nd of December, says, Campbell, your orders came through, you're going to Vietnam. And I can tell you right now, after being in Germany for 4 months, it was pretty nice over there. We had war games, but boy, they were games. And I knew a little bit more about Vietnam, and I hope I'm not jumping too far ahead of myself.
So you said that you didn't want to get drafted. You wanted to enlist to get the training and stuff.
Right.
Now, did any of your other family members, were they involved in the war at all, or?
Yeah, after the fact, and I'll bring that back, but my younger brother, who was 2 years younger than I, he went to Vietnam 2 years after I was there, and I'll bring him into it a little bit later. My older brother, not the one that was a priest, 2 older brothers went to the priesthood. But the one in the middle of the elder, he went into the Air Force before Vietnam, and he got out before Vietnam was a war. And so really I was the first. My brother-in-laws, both of them served one of them served during World War II at the end, and the other one served at the end of World War II, Korea. And I really didn't know much about the service other than this is what this is what you did, and you wind up getting disciplined, and you learn the ropes and learn. The funny part was you got guys from all over the country. Some of them literally got their first pair of boots or shoes, and some of them were quite backwards. And that's understandable. We're being drafted, so if you're 18, I don't care where you're from, you're getting drafted. And especially if you're, I hate to put it this way, but if you're not well educated and you're not well connected and you're not going to college and you're not married, you are going to get drafted. And so the thing is how do you live in an environment where you get 40 to 60 guys in a building, the barracks, if you will, to cooperate, and then more importantly, get ready so that when you get into a situation that you support each other.
So, you know, you talked a lot about enlisting. Can you what were your feelings going in? Like, were you excited? Were you nervous?
I would say that I was a little bit nervous from the standpoint of the unknown. You know, just saying that the movies I watched as a kid were the Sands of Iwo Jima with John Wayne, or, you know, some war movie, and we never lost a war. I mean, we never lost a battle. And hurrah, hurrah, when Johnny comes marching home, you know, these guys are looked upon and respected. And, you know, I was certainly too young to understand World War II. And, of course, it was over in 45. And I was still really too young with the Korean War, which was like 51, 52. In that range, too young to understand that. And, you know, so really it was just what I saw on TV. And, but I felt that in Germany it was a game. It was just a game going preparedness, training, stuff like that, in the event that you are needed into a war situation. When I finally got those orders for Vietnam, which was, as I said, in December of '66, I was given a 30-day leave, which was great. I could go home for Christmas, and I was engaged to my high school sweetheart. And I waited until the last night before I left to fly out to California to start the process going to Vietnam. And I told her that if anything were to happen to me, I want you to know I asked for this. Now that's significant, as I tell later in my quick story, but it's significant because I asked to go. And I didn't want her blaming the government or what have you. The protests at that particular time were not significant. And I'm not watching a lot of TV back then either, because I was in Germany and we didn't have American TV, you know. So there wasn't a lot of protests. And anyway, off to Vietnam I go. And that was in February 12th of 1967. And I wind up leaving Chicago, and it was probably close to about 10 above zero, cold as hell. And, you know, I wind up in Vietnam. It's about 95 degrees, hot and muggy and smelly. And there's a war going on there. And I thought, you know, when the plane came in, it kind of really diverted down quickly over the jungle. And then it was like it's 6 in the morning or what have you. And we see all this fire going, all the smoke and fire. Well, that's when they, excuse the expression, that's when they burn shit. They have 55-gallon drums that they cut off, and that's the hopper, if you will, and they burn that with kerosene. Well, that was a great, a great awakening, because we had no weapons or anything like that. But that's where the replacement depot was, where they assign you to where you're going to go and what you're going to do.
So you mentioned the weather a little bit. So when you first got to Vietnam,
yeah,
what was your first impression of it? What, like, is there anything that you specifically remember that, you know, jumped out at you? The terrain. Well,
when I first got over there, I would say there were some bombings. I mean, they're like around the area. Of course, we didn't know what it was. They were our planes, you know, dropping napalm or bombs from the area that I was in. And you don't know, and we have no weapons at that moment in time. And I think it's important to point out the first thing that I realized, they had bunkers that you would go into where a siren would go off. Now again, we did not have weapons. We're waiting to be assigned out. And there's trenches between the tents. And because of the monsoon weather there to take the rainfall, well, these trenches, a lot of guys would just piss in them, and after a while they get pretty damn raunchy. And the siren went off, go into the bunker, and a guy, I'm inside the bunker, we don't have weapons yet, and we're just supposed to stay there till they give an all clear. And some guy, I don't know who the guy was, falls in the ditch crying for help. And I'm getting ready to go out of this bunker to bring this guy out of the ditch and help him out. And some big sergeant, who I have no idea was, picked me up, threw me inside the bunker and said, "Let the son of a bitch die." Boy, is this guy got a real problem. And he said, no, he's probably been drugging, and you ain't gonna risk your life for someone doing that. Well, that was a hell of an eye-opener to me. And I use that point and share it only from this standpoint. I never did drugs over there, and they were prevalent as can be. But that one incident where I felt there ain't no way I'm going to be not aware of what's going on around me. And so anyway, thereafter, so the smell was terrible, the humidity was high, the bugs were unreal, and you know, as it turns out, I get sent to a unit, and you start settling in, and meaning you belong to somebody now. You have all your gear, you have all the weaponry that you need, and you got the job assignment that you're going to be working on. And so that started it out, you know, where at least I belonged. And I was not what you would call a combat troop going out looking for villages or warfare. I was more on the internal and providing guard duty and what have you for the base camp that I was in.
Can you walk us a little bit through what your, I know you just touched on it a little bit, but what your role was? What were you trained for? And what was your role in Vietnam? My role, I was with what they call a maintenance and contact team. And that was a very unique role from a standpoint. The unit that I was belonged to was called the 1st Logistical Command. Now there's great units over there, the 25th Infantry, which I was assigned to as attached to, I should say, or the 1st Infantry. These units, we would go as a contact team, which would have a warrant officer, generally speaking, and 5 or 6 service techs, and we would go and support them till they got their maintenance teams up in artillery, and that's replacing gun barrels and what have you like that, and their tanks and their vehicles. So it was to provide that type of service to these units, especially in the far out places, until they actually could get their full team in place. And then we'd transfer on and go to another unit. And in a way that was good because you're always moving, but you never got to really know anybody. You get that close to anybody. Did a lot of guard duty. We'd usually work 12 on and 12 off. 12 on guard duty, 2 on, 2 off, and then 12 on doing the jobs that you needed done. And the fact that we worked on howitzers, they were very critical to the warfare because of their distance. They could, a 175 howitzer, if you will, could fire around almost 16 miles. Well, every so many rounds, that tube had to be replaced. And I'm not talking a small, tiny tube. This is huge. And it had to be done very quickly and promptly. So we'd be on call. I remember New Year's Eve. I don't care. A lot of guys were drinking. I didn't. And we had to get out there, and we had 2 hours to get this tube replaced because it was critical. So I transferred around 4 times when I was over there. And as it turns out, as I reflect back on Vietnam, in just all complete honesty and candor, the first month,
and the last month were my worst, without a doubt. And the first month was because of the unknown. Oh yeah, I had some knowns, or I've heard, and this type of thing, but it was a lot of unknowns, and you never were really at ease. And then the last month, you knew, and the last thing you wanted to do was get super involved and possibly get killed or wounded. The 10 in between, and I know this sounds cruel, but the 10 in between, I didn't give a shit. Now I can tell you honestly, as I look back, you damn right I did give a shit. It affected me a lot, even though what I meant by saying I didn't give a shit, excuse my French, but is that I had so much time left over there. Why the hell should I even think about it? Why worry? Just do it. And what happens will happen. Well, as I shared the thing, I did a lot of volunteer work with the medics and the doctors going out to villages and providing guard duty. I got a picture that I'll show you later. But, and so that we would go out and provide security for a small village where the doctors and nurses could provide basic medicine to the people trying to win their support and trust. And I enjoyed doing that and felt very honored to do it. So that kind of, gives a pretty good overview.
You said you moved around a lot. Obviously you went from one place to another because you're doing all the work on the machines and stuff.
Right.
Can you give us just a quick run through of all the units that you were part of and all the locations that you went?
Sure. I started out in Long Binh, which was north of Saigon, probably about 25 miles. And from there, I was sent to Cu Chi. Now Long Binh was with the 1st Logistical Command and some group there. And then when they sent me to Cu Chi, I was attached to the 25th Infantry Division. Cu Chi was near the Cambodian border, and it was a pretty tough base camp. They got a lot of problems in that area, as true of anywhere really. And then from there, I got sent to Phuc Vinh, which is probably about 50 miles north of Saigon. That was the 101st Airborne that I was attached to. And then shortly before I left in December, January of 68, December of 67, January 68, I got sent to Xi'an, which is DIAN, north of Saigon, with the 1st Infantry Division. And that's where I ended up. And I ended up there. My rotation date, when you go to Vietnam, in the Army, it's a 12-month tour of duty. So they give you a date. So I was scheduled to go home on the 12th of February, 1968. And as it turns out, that's the date. So when somebody asks how are you doing, and let's say we're about the 15th of January, they're called a short timer. I'm a short timer. I've got 15 in a wake up or 20 in a wake up. The key was always the wake up, of course. And but my company commander, we had the Tet Offense, which was the 1968, January 30th, 31st. That's where everything broke loose in Vietnam with surprise attacks everywhere. And it was quite a very, very hectic time. And we were on total duty. Anyway, my company commander comes to me on February 7th. And I'm not due to go home except on February 12th. He said, "You're going home." Oh, man, this is great. He said, "You got 2 hours. I got a Jeep. We'll take you up to Bien Hoa, which is the air base." And that was about 15 miles from where I was at. And, bingo, throw the rifle bag. You guys got a duffel bag full of your own personal stuff. That's it. You don't have a bunch of stuff you have to worry about. And off I go. And bingo, on February 7th, I leave. My family was expecting me home after the 12th. My fiancée was after the 12th. And So in any event, we got on the Freedom Bird, that's what we called them. And boy, you could hear a pin drop when that plane took off, thinking that, oh man, if we can get over that South China Sea, we're not going to get shot down. And I'm telling you, it was like once we got over it, whoever, I don't know, any of the people on the plane, you know, and so we wound up landing in Oakland, California, and started the processing out.
So out of all these camps that you're at, obviously, can you, I mean, tell us a little bit like what they were like, and maybe which one was your favorite, which one was your least favorite?
I think my least favorite and the favorite happened to be the same one, and that was Phuc Vinh. Phuc Vinh was where I was able to get close contact with children, a lot of children. And it was a very friendly village. And we were allowed to go out of our camp, you know, periodically. And somehow I have always wound up with these little kids and bring in candy from home, hard stuff and stuff like hard candy. And boy, I just loved that. You know, it was a whole different perspective. And I looked at these poor kids that when we get mortared, they get mortared. And saying, wait a minute, I don't know how these little kids do it. You know, it's scary to us because, you know, what are we going to do? We have to hide, if you will, go into the bunker. But in any event, I developed a lot of relationships with these kids. And I had a Christmas tree. I have one here, which you might have seen. I had a little Christmas tree that my sister sent me for Christmas. And so Christmas of '67, I was able to bring all these kids, as number of kids I could fit in a Jeep. And there were about 20, 25 of them in a Jeep. They were hanging over each other and the tires, and you know, but I could bring them in and we could share our Christmas gifts, if you will, candy, and have a dinner. We cooked out like hot dogs and stuff like that, beans, and just share Christmas with these kids. And when I say one of the best times was these two little kids, Hung and Hing, little girls that I got to know. I gave them the Christmas tree. What am I going to do with this doggone thing? I ain't going to bring it back. And I, you know, just really was so blessed, if you will, to at least enjoy that moment in time. And the other thing it did for the other guys, my contact team, is that we weren't thinking about Christmas, poor me. We were sharing our Christmas with these kids. And it was really a wonderful, wonderful time. So that was my worst. And the worst part of it was because one of the kids' fathers said I didn't know the father, but I knew the kid. And he didn't show up one time when I was down in the village. And it turned out the Viet Cong had cut the father's head off and put it on a post. And these were type of things that those people had to endure, because if they supported us, wait a minute, we're going to make it tough on you. And boy, I really, really felt bad. So I got a lot of life experiences. And another one, I think we were filling a big sandbag area, and some kids would come and play, but this is a mammoth sand pile. And all of a sudden it's like an avalanche. And one of the kids got underneath this avalanche in this sand. And, you know, there were about 3 or 4 of us guys there. And we were familiar with the kids, you know, and let them play. We didn't care. Well, after this avalanche, we couldn't find this one kid. And you can't go in there digging with a shovel. You got to go there digging with a hand. It turned out we did get the kid. The kid was dead. And we take it up to the village, which was right next door. Nobody even wanted to identify that poor little kid. And these were things that, you know, in war, there so many bad things. And quite frankly, there's the hell side of it. We've seen hell. And the good side of it was being able to provide some joy to some of those people. Yeah.
So you mentioned that your sister sent you a tree, and then you
Right.
Christmas tree, and then you took that and you celebrated with the kids. Can you just tell us a little bit, like, how you contacted with your family or your friends back at home? What was that like?
The hard part there, Parker, was the fact that we didn't have telephone communication. There were a few areas that they did through shortwave radio or something like that, but for me and most of us, it was a case of writing a letter, which was, by the way, the nice thing is the Army let us write free instead of having a postage stamp. So that was a big perk. Anyway, so we'd write a letter. So if you asked a question, like, will you marry me? It would take 3 weeks or so before you might even get the reply back to you. So, there wasn't, it's very hard to have a quick dialogue. And you might be in the middle of writing something and there'd be a mortar attack and what have you. That kind of took my train of thought away. So I'm not going to finish any more on this one here. But yeah, I would say that the communication was really, really tough. And I would try and make sure that I would write my mom, and everything was fine. The weather was good. The food was great. They're really taking good care of us. And Mom, I don't know what you're seeing on TV. I have no idea, but I'm not in those areas. So I'd always try and, put a positive thing onto to the letters home. And my fiance, we had some really nice correspondence. And again, I didn't try to put the none of the blood and guts crap in there. That was challenging. But again, I had no idea what they were watching on TV either, because we had no clue. And as I look back in history, there was a lot going on here. In 67, 68, President and Martin Luther King, et cetera, et cetera. So the communication was very, very hard. And then I got my orders in Vietnam right around Christmas of 67. They're sending me back to Germany to the same damn unit I left. And I only going to have about 9 months left in the Army. I thought, oh man. So they offered me the opportunity of extending in Vietnam for 6 months and getting out 3 months early, or keeping my orders to Germany for 9 months. Well, I can guarantee you, I'm not a candy ass, but I'm going to Germany. I don't need to spend another 6 months here. And not that I wouldn't do it, but I'll tell you, it wasn't worth no 3 months to me. And so when I got the orders, that's when I communicated with my fiance at St. Teresa College in Winona that, hopefully we can get married, because I'm going to Germany, and I know where I'm going because I was there before, and I know a lot of the people, and then we can travel all around Europe, go to France and what have you. Well, anyway, it took a while for that communication to work out, and so all of a sudden I show up, because I told you I got home early. I was home 5 days early. She did not know I was home. I had my sister pick me up at O'Hare Field, keep it quiet. I borrowed her car, drove right up to Winona, Minnesota, and, laid it out. She went to an all-girl college, so I was a nervous wreck. Plus, I found out when I did get home, and I think I should point this out, at Oakland, and we went to fly out a commercial airline, that somehow there were some people that just didn't like Vietnam vets. And we stood out like a sore thumb. And they started swearing at us and spitting and calling, and what the hell is this? Again, we didn't have the news media, so I was not prepared for that. And boy, I tell you, I couldn't get that uniform off fast enough. And I wasn't Johnny come marching home with John Wayne, hurrah, hurrah, and parades, and you welcome home. No way. In one breath, I was happy as a lark to get the hell out of the United States and go to Germany. Because, at least I'm not going to be watching this crap with Kent State and some of the problems that went on back then. So anyway, I wind up at College of St. Teresa, and Cecilia is her name. We talked it over, and drove back to Illinois and surprised the hell out of her dad because he felt she should have stayed in college. Can't say I blame the guy, but I ain't going to Germany alone either. So it turned out we did get married. I had 30 days to do it, so it had to be done quick because when they say you're going, you're going. So on March 12th or something like that was my date to be in Germany. So she came over, and we had a wonderful, wonderful start.
All right, so then we'll just continue on with,
Yep.
with your discharge.
Yep.
And can you explain to us a little bit about why you got to leave the 5 days early from Vietnam?
Well, now I can. At that moment in time, there was no way I could. It turned out that probably in the early 1990s, when the Vietnam Memorial Wall was built and presented, and there was a what they call a traveling wall that was going around the country, and it wound up going to Port Washington, Wisconsin. And I thought, wow, this is see the traveling wall. And one of my I reflect back then, there was no way in hell I could go to that wall. I was going to PTSD groups at the VA. Things were really getting bad in my mind and life. And one of my sons went to that wall in Port Washington and came back with an etching, because you could put a piece of paper up and etch the name. And I don't know what this kid was told, but he came back and said, "Mr. Campbell, I'm so proud of you." "Why are you proud of me, Brian?" "Well, because I found your name on the wall there." I thought, whoever taught this kid about what that wall's about? So anyway, thank you. And I go back, and it's the first time I went on the internet and took a look at this virtual wall, I guess it was called at that time. And I took a look at Joseph Campbell. Very interesting. And then they give the details. He was killed on February 6th, 1968. I went home on February 7th, 1968. He went home in a casket. I got a place on that plane. And I could say because of him, I know there were others killed. But Joseph Campbell was killed on February 6th. He also had the same birthday as my father. So to me, it was more than just a coincidence. And I'll never, ever forget that. And what it started teaching me after realizing that that guy gave his life to me, it wasn't just him anymore. It was all of them that gave their life. And the one thing that I learned from that, very, very sincerely, was taught to me at the end of Saving Private Ryan, which I just watched the movie, but I see the ending, and bingo. He and his wife and family are in France, Private Ryan. If you saw the movie, Captain Miller, who was in charge of the search to find him, he was killed on the bridge. But before he died, he told Private Ryan, pulled him to his ear, and told him to earn this. And Captain Miller died. So here it is 50 years later. Private Ryan is with his family in France at the cemetery. And they go to the grave of Captain Miller. Captain Miller, Private Ryan's wife comes up and taps him on the shoulder. And gently, he looks at her and says, "Tell me I've lived a good life. Tell me I'm a good man." And she looks at him in bewildered. Why would you say such a thing? Well, that was the end of the movie. But what it told me is I would look at that wall now. And I went to it on the honor flight 2 years ago. And it was the first time that I could actually go. And go there with gratitude. And I said gratitude and respect. And touch his name. And tell him, thank you for giving me a good life. And please understand I'm trying to earn your respect and respect of all those that gave it all for me. That, to me, for me to say that I have gratitude, yes, and I said sadness, but I also think of Korea, World War II, and so many that provided us the freedom. And I look at you young men from Marquette High, and my sons and what have you, and I'll tell you, I know what freedom is about, and I'm so proud of you guys doing what you're doing, and at least trying to learn a little bit about a very, very bad time in a lot of our lives. And I can tell you honestly that I've been to hell. And I don't want to go back again. And neither do I want you to go back. And do whatever I can to live a good life. So you can also. And my grandkids.
Okay, so now you get back early, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that you went and visited your girlfriend at the time, or your fiance at the time.
Right.
Right away. Was that the first thing you did, or?
Yep. Yeah. I tell you that I had just nothing but and she did not know, as I think I shared, she did not know I was home yet. Right. So when I got up to College of St. Teresa, there was a payphone about a block away. I had been up there before I went to Vietnam. Anyway, just so shy. I ain't going into no all-girls dorm, you know. And I called her from the payphone, and she was like, "Where are you?" I said, I'm outside. I'll be out there in this red Pontiac, my sister's car. And, oh, my word. And I tell you, this is really not good, but I knew of no other way to get the point across. Get away from that dorm, pull the car about a block away and pull over. And I said, "Will you or won't you?" I wanted the answer to, "Will you marry me?" Get married. And she said, "Oh, Joe, you know, I'm in my junior year and things are blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to Germany on the 12th of March, and I don't have a choice. And I don't think I'm going alone. I want you to go with me, and we'll have a great time over there." I said, "I can't think of a better way to start a marriage away from your family, my family." Anyway, she said, "Let me think about it tonight." So, good boy, I go back to my motel. She goes back to her dorm, and I pick her up the next day to take to one class. And then she came out of the class, and yes. And my brother, older brother, the priest, happened to be a chaplain assistant at Camp Pendleton with the Marines. So I had his phone number. I called him and said, "Hey, Pete, can you come in and marry us on March 9th? That's the Saturday before I have to be in Germany." He said yes. Yay! So anyway, that happened rather quickly, very quickly. And so we get over to Germany, and believe you, I mean, to be able to go to Paris, to London, and Amsterdam, I mean, it was just unreal. Everything over there is like 2 hours away, and you're in another country. But she also said, "Guess what? I'm pregnant." Oh boy. And here's the thing, my rotation date from Germany was December 9th. And that's another firm date. I said, "Well, the baby isn't due until December 9th. They said, "Well, you'll have to re-enlist, or you're going home. You're going home on your rotation." I said, "You got to be kidding me." Well, it turned out they were pulling my leg a little bit, because I could ask for an extension of 30 days or 30-day increments, no more than 1 year. I'll take a 30-day extension. Great. So she didn't have to go home, because at that time, a woman who was pregnant could not fly after 6 months. Continental, or so as it turns out, she was able to stay, and that little critter was born on November 18th, a couple weeks early, but it turned out very wonderful. So he was born over there, and she went home just right after Christmas, and then I went home because I extended for a month. So I went home the first week of January, and then we got back. And then I've got this child, I got a wife, I don't have a job, and what am I going to do, you know? And a friend of mine, father owned a janitorial cleaning business that we grew up with, that the kids grew up with next door. Well, I got offered a job, I'll take it, and I'll take any job. I got to have money and take care of my family. And I had bought a car in Germany, which was great, a Volkswagen, but it was held up in a dock strike. So I couldn't get the damn thing. So I thought, holy shit, I mean, that's the reason I bought that car. And as it turns out, Leonard's Clean Right, the company I'm going to work for, had a van. Of course, it's got Leonard's Clean Right with buckets and mops and everything in it. It's fine by me, it's transportation. So anyway, that got us started. And in Geneva, Illinois is where we settled, which was right next to St. Charles, where I grew up.
So after being away, you know, in Vietnam and Germany, for the amount of time that you were, was there anything different when you got back that you could notice, like right away, like something's different? Or?
You know, the thing that I remember the first night with my fiance when I got back from bringing her home from College of St. Teresa. Her father, a very dignified attorney, very straight-laced, nice fella, very professional. And here this wandering generality, me, you know, comes into play, and he asked his daughter when she was going back to college. And she's over there, she ain't saying a word, because we've already agreed. And I figured, well, if she ain't going to say a word, I guess it's time for me to speak up. I said, well, Dad, we're getting married on March 9th, and we're going to Germany on March 12th. And it's like, holy shit. You know, and so anyway, that was quite a shock, and but we got through that. He was not pleased, and well, what are you going to do, you know, when you get out? I don't know. I'll get a job, you know. So as it turns out, anyway, when I got back, as I said, took that janitorial job, and then. Ironically, one of the places that I helped clean was an Episcopalian church, and I got along with the priest there really, really well. And one day he comes up, because I did twice a week there for a lot of things, and after weddings I'd clean up the rice and all that. I'd bring my wife and my little boy, and we'd, you know, do our thing with the buckets and the vacuums, and, you know, and he asked me, why are you doing this? What do you mean, why am I doing it? I need a job. He said, well, it doesn't seem like you. And I, you know, we guys used to have nice conversations, but as to wrap it up there, though, he had a parishioner who owned Vernon Psychological Laboratories in Chicago, which is a professional testing lab for placement of executives. And he was the priest there at the St. Mark's Episcopal Church, liked me so much. He said, well, why don't I'll have a meet with Dr. Leroy Vernon, even though he works in Chicago, but he lives in Geneva. Well, I met with him, and they agreed that I could take this test to find out what I'm good at. And fine. And I actually had to pay a minimal fee. But as it turns out, I take the test, and instead of going into Chicago for the results, he let me come to his mansion that he lived in Geneva, a beautiful place, very nice man. And so he's got the results, and he's sitting there saying, Joe, now, tell me about this, kind of like what we're talking about right now. Tell me about this, that. And then he said, you know what? I got your results here. That ain't you. I said, Dr. Vernon, I guarantee it's me. There is no reason I would lie. It's one of those would you do this, that? You may be familiar with these type of tests. And saying, there's no way you can beat the damn thing. If you said no on this one and yes on that one, you know, there's a conflict because of the way the question. He said, well, I'll tell you what, I'd like to give you another test on me because that test is not you. And as it turns out, my feeling, he said, the thing I highlighted was I'd be very good as a telephone outside pole guy, electrical outside, you know, everything was outside construction type thing. Well, of course, I got back from Vietnam. Of course, a lot of it being outside all the time, you know. I have no idea. But I took the test over, and that's when he said, no. And the other thing that is a salesman, no way. And the thing was the stigma. My dad died. He was a salesman when he was 48, and I just thought I'll die too. Those are things anyway. But as it turns out, that sent me on a new road to saying, what am I really good at doing? And so I wound up getting in the welding supply business with the support of my brother-in-law. And it turned out I loved it. And when you love something, I guess, a lot, you're going to do pretty doggone good at it. And I don't mean welding. We sold the welding equipment, the process, and the application. So that's what got me going in that. And I got transferred. I had another child. My daughter was born in St. Charles. And then I got transferred up here to Milwaukee for a major company that I was working for out of New York. And then they, that's what, like I say, got me up here. And then bingo, I got 3 more boys, 3 more Marquette High students coming up. And, you know, so that's what got me going in that field.
I can imagine that you witnessed some pretty horrific things over in Vietnam, as we talked about. Can you tell us, like, what helped you to cope with some of the things that you saw over there? Like, once you got back, honestly.
Excuse me, I have these heart shocks that that they've been treating. It's an Agent Orange type thing, and so I'm not collapsing on you, but they do happen, and the VA's been treating it for quite some time. They're stray nerves, and from the effects of the Agent Orange, and the nerves will occasionally shock my heart and cause me to jolt. So please, I'll do my best. I have no control over it, and they do happen periodically. Sometimes maybe when I get a little stressed out, I don't know. I've tried to figure out what may cause it. It's not food or anything. But anyway, the question, how did I adjust? You know, I didn't. I had to work. That's what I had to adjust to. I had a child right away from Germany back here. I had to find a job. I ain't got time. Plus, when I went into the Army, I didn't go in with a bunch of friends. You know, I went in, signed to a unit, met some people, got transferred. I come home, and a couple of my friends have died in Vietnam. And I will say, one of them was a very, very chum. You ask about kids we grew up with in the ballpark and, you know, make-up games. One of them, you know, was killed. And they had his funeral. And I couldn't go to that funeral. I drove to it. I could not go into it. And then I drove the next morning to the cemetery following the procession. And I couldn't do it. Now I share that with you because at that moment in time, I've been back less than a year. And I'm crying my eyes out on the side of the road. I didn't pull in. And then boom, get to work. That came back to tell, as I told the story to my counselor at the VA, post-trauma stress. Again, I take a look at all the years. Having the 3 boys, again, right away, 1975, 77, and 79. So, I mean, I've got kids and I got a a house, I got a job, and man, I got to work my ass off. And they're going to go to Marquette. I really have to work my ass off. And my daughter went to Divine Savior Holy Angels. Anyway, it was after my son started Marquette. I think it was in 80, he might have 84, 85. And things were actually starting to go pretty well. I was actually earning some good wages, and we were able to get work grants at Marquette and Divine Savior. And the house was not, it was not over killing us. And, you know, and I'd come home from work and have a drink. And I'd go out with, now I'm dealing with General Motors and some of these bigger companies, and you go out with their, you got to have a drink. Oh, you got to go out to dinner. You got to go out to a nice restaurant. You got to have another couple more drinks. And I'm not saying that, as it turns out, it didn't take long. And I'm having a drink all the time. And I'm trying to think of that incident with the kid with the etching, and a couple other things where I felt there ain't no way I can talk about Vietnam. Now, it's 15 years ago. People are going to tell me get over it. Well, I'll tell you, maybe they didn't. But if they did, I wanted to wring their neck. I did not know how to handle it. My wife said, Joe, you got a problem. I mean, I had bad dreams and punched her and all these type of things. And I just rose over those. Oh, that was just blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, leave me alone. There's no need to bring that up. Well, I started drinking on the weekends. And, you know, one thing led to another. The hell with this provider shit. I can't deal with it. And she went to one of the chaplains, the priests there at Pius, where we went to Pius grade school on 76th, who happened to be a Vietnam veteran. And we found out, and nice fella, I really liked him. And he came to me, wanted to talk to me about getting help. I told him, F you, leave me alone. It's not your business. So, I mean, what I'm trying to quickly share here, I had some serious problems. And there ain't no way in hell I was about to talk about them until my wife finally sent the papers and a restraining order. You're out of here. And the reason she did that, and I don't blame her a bit at that time, I blamed her for everything. I said, you're the problem, not me. Well, I became living on my own, going to work, and then a good friend, an attorney, and that's, I always had different feelings about attorneys, but I tell you, this guy was a very good friend. He asked me if I'd ever been on a retreat. I thought, yeah, I was in the seminary, I had a couple of them. We doing okay? We had a couple of them, and as it turns out, I said, yeah, I could probably use one. I'm in the middle of a divorce, living on my own. The kids are really, the kids, I should say, they're young adults. They're fractured. The youngest actually was senior at Marquette High at that time. And so I said, yeah, I would consider. They said, well, it's a great place, Jesuit Retreat House in Oshkosh. They got a retreat coming up in December, early the first week of December. Joe, there's one slot opening. I'll make sure they reserve if you send them the money, $50 or something like that. No problem, I'll do it. I figured I needed, you had asked me earlier about my spirituality. My spirituality was going to hell in a handbasket. I was the savior. Everything I did was right. Everything else did was wrong. Anyway, I wound up going up to this Jesuit retreat house Thursday night. There's 60 guys there. They started with a nice dinner, and then we go into the chapel. This guy gets up in the pulpit and says, hi, my name is Pat, and I'm an alcoholic. And I thought, who gives a shit about that? And these guys like parakeets. My name is Bill from I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. Holy shit. What the hell is this crap? I want to find that attorney and wring his neck. It got to me, and I was somewhat in the middle of this group. And it got to me, and I mumbled something. I figured, I don't know anybody here. I'm just going to get my goddamn bag and get out of here. I stayed. They had a little prayer at the thing. Went back to my little tiny room, my little bed, a little sink. And I thought, oh, Lord. I stayed for the 3 days and listened to the 12-step silent retreat. We could talk to one of the priests, and they were all Jesuit, very, very good. We could talk to him, and I also talked to this guy, Pat, who got up there because he was from Wauwatosa. And he had asked me if I'd ever gone to any other meetings. Yeah, man, this is the last meeting I'm ever going to. He said, oh, there's really a good one in Brookfield. I thought, oh, yeah. Yeah, he said, I'll pick you up. And this is after the retreat. All right, fine. So we go to the first meeting and end it here, really. Somebody gave a talk for about 10 minutes. We break into a small group, 4 or 5 guys, the other groups, but anyway, and they all share something there. It got to me, I said, my name is Joe. I'm an alcoholic. I'm goddamn angry. And with that, I pass. And that was the end of it. But you don't do stuff like that when you go to an AA meeting and say you're goddamn angry. With that, I pass. But the thing I shared, not out of humor, but the truth, the only thing I heard out of that speaker's mouth was that this program demands rigorous honesty. And I figured, you know what? When I started to share, I'm going to be rigorously honest. I was damn angry, and I had no more to say about it. But I have not had a drink in 21 years. And I've conducted an AA meeting at the VA every Sunday morning for the last 20 years. The last year I haven't because of my health. Every Sunday, helping my fellow vets out who also helped me out by going through it. And it's just been a wonderful. I've made amends with my ex-wife. She did not remarry. My kids are family. I've got 11 grandkids. And my grandkids, not a one of them, know me as a alcoholic, if you will. We don't even discuss it. There's no need to, but they're not familiar with any type of the traits or things that go along with being an alcoholic.
So you mentioned that you still work with other veterans today,
yeah. And
I know that you are one of the founders of the Dry Hooch. Can you maybe expand on those?
I think what happened, as I started getting sober, not only did I get sober, but I started going for help with post-traumatic stress disorder, where I started realizing that I had a problem. Now, the first problem I had was blaming everybody for the divorce, that it wasn't my fault. But this priest that I told you about, who I told to leave me alone, I did wind up calling him a year later and said, Father, I need help. And he said, well, I've got a counselor at the VA who's a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, Joe. I want you to meet with him. He specializes in post-traumatic stress disorder. But I'm going to bring you in, because if you go in and say you need help, they're going to send you to a psychiatrist, and they'll probably give you the drugs to take care of, calm you down. Well, he went with me. I met Dr. Murray Bernstein, wonderful man. I met with him once a week for about an hour and a half. And after about 3 weeks, he finally said, well, when are you going to talk about it? Talk about what? When are you going to talk about it? All I hear out of your mouth is your anger towards your wife, your anger towards this, anger towards that. When are you going to talk about Vietnam? So what'd you say? When are you going to talk about Vietnam? I got so angry. I wanted to punch him. But I broke down and I cried like a baby. I said, I need help. And now all of a sudden, I'm starting, you'd asked about how I was able to help these other veterans. A lot was because of my journey. My journey was bad, but my journey was also good. And the fact of the matter is that I could now share and understand with empathy, compassion, and love and respect, no matter what they did, how they did it, and saying, you know, I've been blessed. That trick that attorney played on me to get me up there, I love that attorney, and he knows it. And I thanked him not when I got back. I wanted to still wring his neck. But I tell you, shortly thereafter, I told him, I said, my God, it got me the freedom to finally get out of myself. And that's where I just learned that the more you get out of yourself, the more you get out of yourself. And that was where God came in through these people that helped me. And the more I wound up understanding where I came from and why, my dad dying and all this type of stuff, saying, you know what? Tell me I've lived a good life. Tell me I'm a good person. I can tell you about all my bad shit, no doubt about it. And I certainly don't wish that on anyone. But sometimes we go through that. And we need someone like a Dr. Bernstein or a Father Joe and other people. And I just take a look, the dry hooch, like you said, a friend of mine, homicide. The founder of the dry hooch was homicide. Somehow his daughters got a hold of me when I was president of the Vietnam Veterans of America here in Milwaukee to tell me that their father, who I did not know from Adam, was in prison for alcohol, killing a motorcyclist with his car, and was going through all kinds of trauma. What am I to do about it? You know, who am I? A very good friend of mine was a public defender. And another friend of mine was an alcohol rehab counselor. It turned out the founder of the dry hooch, it was tough. He was the first case acknowledged with post-trauma stress disorder. And not saying he was vindicated, he still did what he did, but he was not imprisoned anymore. And this guy and I drove to some meeting that we went to, and on the way back we stopped at this place in I think it was Waterford, called The Bunker. And it was a vet bar and grill and what have you. And we got in there and it's all like a bunker. You know, I mean, the scenery around it was quite neat. And they had good burgers. And anyway, it turns out, he says, Joe, can you imagine a dry hooch? Now, a hooch was what we lived in Vietnam. That's what they called it, the hooch. And dry meaning alcohol-free. Oh, Bob, man, that's powerful. And that started the journey of the dry hooch, which he and others, not just me, I just helped them a little bit. But we got that thing going off the ground with help of many other, this one attorney and other people, bankers, and got her going. And the mission was to help those people that we both know, he and I knew only too well, that we came from the same trouble. So that, and then involved with any veteran things. When the veterans, when we came home from Vietnam, as I shared earlier, and most of it is maybe you've studied, it was really a bad time to be a Vietnam vet when we came home back in the 60s and 70s, because we were the enemy to a lot of people. And so when I take a look at the Iraqi-Afghanistan vets in Desert Storm, and some of them I knew, they were my son's friends, you know, and they're coming back, and I figured they ain't never going to be treated the way we were, never. And well, saying it is one thing. What are you going to do about it? Welcome them home, and make sure they're welcome home, and make sure that they know if they need help, that they got people that will understand and guide them and not criticize and condemn them. So that in a way, the AA thing, when I got involved at the VA, I saw it in this book, The Where and When, where AA meetings were, and it was called the VA Hardcore Group. I said, well, that sounds good for me. And I went over to a meeting there, and I didn't realize, but all the guys in the meeting were impatient. But it was in the book, so I could go, and they couldn't believe that someone would come in there that could go home. They had to stay there for their recovery program. Wow, what a place to be. And that's what led to really starting to do it every Sunday and helping them out any way I possibly could. Who knew better? And I'm not trying to put myself on any damn pedestal, but who knew better about some of the effects and ill effects of war, alcohol, and abuse? Yeah.
You mentioned that you obviously suffered from PTSD and
Right.
Agent Orange. Can you maybe expound a little bit on that and tell us, like, how does your military experience affect your life today? Not only in that sense, but obviously.
Well, one is acceptance. You know, the one thing I learned, actually, and quite frankly, it was a saying within the AA program, and it was called acceptance. And it goes, acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I find some person, place, or thing unacceptable to me at this moment, I will not find any serenity till I accept them as being exactly where they're supposed to be now. And so I take a look at, with that acceptance, I found out that my PTSD or my anger or what have you, I have a right. I am not going to apologize for what I experienced or how I went through it. That was me. And some of it I don't like. But you know what? That's what made me who I am. And it helped me understand the foundation of a lot of my deep-rooted problems. Post-trauma stress disorder, that's reliving the thing is, quite frankly, knowing you guys were coming today, when were you in Vietnam, Joe? Last night. This morning. That's not bad. I look at that Christmas tree that's back there. I look at those things and saying, you know, as much as I hate the things that happened and the death that I saw, both ways, I just hope you guys and somehow we can find ways of settling things, you know, that are far better than losing 58,000 and then thinking of World War II ended, 70 years ago, Normandy, and saying, you know, hey. So I look at it's a blessing, quite frankly, Parker, it's a blessing. And the PTSD, I go now once a month. I'm around my friends. I hear some of them. I know a lot of my friends still hate Vietnam and anything to do with it. And I pray for them because I know what they're going through. I don't know how to pull them out, but I know one thing. I will not diminish them. No way in hell. Because they're going to be saying the same damn thing. You know, why is this still there? Well, it's always going to be there. The war is over for me now, but it will always be there for the rest of my days. Why should I deny that? I was there. But be that as it may, I have an obligation to build again and teach others what I know, and then do what I can in my life to find the goodness and meaning to this life. And that's what allowed me to have a family. That's what allowed me to have a relationship with my ex-wife, and that my children are not at odds over each other or over their mother and their father. So, yeah, I've been blessed. And quite frankly, I go to church every Sunday, but my dad used to say, pray like hell, but row for the shore. Now I understood what he was saying. Is when I was rowing for that shore, I only had one oar in the water, so I just kept going around and around and around. Row for the shore, get that, get back. So it's been a very key part of my life and always will be. All right, what I have here is a collection of some really significant photographs that tell a very quick story about some of the significant happenings within Vietnam. This happens to be the one on the, which would be your upper left, would be the bombing of a ammo dump. And then we got a picture of a chaplain having a prayer service on a bunch of bunkers. You know, so we had a lot of drive-by confessions and stuff like that. It was really nice. We get a quick general absolution as they went by. Here's a picture of me on guard duty in this village of this, which I'll lead down to the picture below it, is the village of Trang Bang, where that little girl running down the street naked, that was in June of 72. That picture, that little girl, is the lady down in the bottom with me in 2003 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Kim Fook. And I was doing guard duty, if I quick go back up, in that village back in 1967. So this incident with the bombing, with it, the napalm burned the clothes off of her, and many others, was an accidental bomb dropping. That was in 1972. So anyway, I was there before, but she was probably one of the kids that I met in the village. The picture of the helicopter with all the people, that's April 30th, 1975, which some consider it to be the end of the war. And that's the last people trying to get the hell out of Saigon as the war was ending and North Vietnam was now taking over all the country. The picture with the man at the wall with his business clothes on, putting his hand, and a bunch of brothers there with their hands to his, saying that we are together. And then the picture of the bottom is Big Boy, and that all I can say there is that picture of the Big Boy was so fun. One of the guys from Illinois, we both knew where this Big Boy was, and I'm coming in from a mission on the Jeep radio, and he says, "Hey, Bravo Joe, would you pick me up a Big Boy order of onion rings to the chocolate malt?" And we played that game back and forth a couple times, and some real serious communication. And so the first thing I did with my fiance when we got back to Illinois, we went to Big Boy. And I tell you, we had fun with that. The other picture, which I'm going to give you guys, is a picture of a collage of the family, my wife, and the 5 children. The 4 boys, I point out, are all Marquette High grads. And I called it, we were suffering from male tuition. But Marquette was very kind to me and allowed all the boys to have work grants there, and they usually worked in the rectory with the priests. The picture up here on the top is the family I came from, the 9 of us, and I'm this one right over here. But and then we got the 4 boys and the wife, and I got my 3 boys when they were kids, working on Thanksgiving, breaking bread. It was just a picture I dearly love, and some of my grandkids and what have you. And there's a couple neat things about here that says, some call the Vietnam War history. We call it, who lived there, our story. And not everyone who lost his life in Vietnam died there. Not everyone who came home from Vietnam ever left there. And greater love has no man than to sacrifice one's life. And then I thought, from a standpoint of a humor standpoint, I've got a pay stub that I just located from February of 1968. And I've got my combat pay on there, hazardous duty as they called it, and we got a whopping $2 a day for that hazardous duty. It was wonderful. And maybe a meal charge of $2.90. So I've got that, and then I've got some wonderful gifts for you guys of some dog tag or the chains of, these are the Vietnam ribbons, which is the green, yellow, red. That are symbolic of our ribbons from Vietnam, as opposed to different colors for Korea, World War II, I, etc. And then I've got the beautiful American patch for all you guys. And then I've got the red, white, and blue little beads there. And then I've got a very special, they call them challenge coins. And most vets have them now, especially Iraqi, Afghanistan vets. We didn't have them in Vietnam. But these are coins that we hand out to people for various causes. This one happens to be for POW, MIA, prisoner of war, missing in action. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, some of the wonderful things that I have for you. But the greatest thing that I have for you is my gratitude for you coming here and taking my story, which is not just my story. Hopefully it's the story of so many. And those of my brothers that are hurting this very day, that we keep them in our prayers, that they can find the peace that I have found and the gratitude, so that they can say that, yes, I'm living a good life, and yes, I'm a good man because of the sacrifices that they did for me, which is the greatest of all, is what Christ did for all of us. And we're just practicing that and living that. And so with that, I say thank you. God bless you, and God bless Marquette High.
Mr. Campbell, I know I speak for myself as well as my two partners in this project, but we'd like to thank you officially for just spending your time with us and sharing your story. And just thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
You're more than welcome, and don't forget to thank your mothers. It's Mother's Day, and for allowing you guys to spend a little bit of that time with me is very, very significant. God bless you again, and your mothers and families.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.